Dad kicked me out of Mum's birthday. Then my sister's boyfriend stood up. She's my boss. She stood on the porch, rain sliding down her face like cold fingers. You are nobody here, her father shouted, and the door slammed shut so hard the windows rattled. Helen stiffened, fighting the old urge to beg for a scrap of kindness. She clutched the paper-thin gift bag that held the scarf she had chosen for her mother, a colour the doctors said might brighten weary eyes. It felt foolish now, a child's offering. Behind her, the party lights glittered through lace curtains. Laughter rolled out in warm waves, muffled by glass, every note a needle. The house smelled of cinnamon and wealth and memories that never belonged to her. She had driven 3 hours in the rain for this, rehearsing polite words, promising herself she would not grow small tonight. Yet here she was, exiled to the porch like an uninvited ghost. Footsteps creaked on the boards. She turned, expecting another cousin with a rehearsed apology. Instead, she saw Ben, her younger sister's boyfriend, tall, steady, rain in his dark hair. He carried himself with the quiet of someone who listens more than he speaks, someone who notices small cruelties in crowded rooms. You do not have to go, he said softly. I do, she answered. The words rasped. Mum's cake is waiting. Ben's gaze held hers, calm, unhurried. Stay, or let me drive you somewhere warm. Lightning flickered, thunder rolled distant. Helen almost laughed. In the alley of her mind she heard her father again. You make scenes, you embarrass us, you never learned your place. All her life she had folded the sharp corners of herself to fit inside that box. She stepped down the stairs. It is fine. I am used to weather. Ben followed. I work for you. The sentence landed like a thrown stone. She blinked, rain and surprise stinging her eyes. What? I am one of the project leads at Harbour Lights. You sign my paychecks. The scandalous truth she had hidden for so long stood between them, alive, undeniable. Harbour Lights was her company, her secret kingdom built from sleepless nights and coffee spooned with hope. No one in this house knew. She had made sure of it. Ben continued, voice low. I took the position because I believed in what you built. Tonight I watched them talk about you like you were a stain on the rug. I cannot stand for that. A window scraped open above them. Her younger sister Grace leaned out, cheeks flushed with champagne and alarm. Ben, what are you doing? Dad is furious. Ben did not look up. Invite her back in. Or I tell everyone whose donations kept this family afloat during the lean years. Grace's mouth fell open. Helen could almost see the birthday balloons reflected in her sister's widening eyes. Grace whispered her name, not a contemptuous hiss this time, but a shaky plea. Helen felt the porch spin. The secret was smoke now. There was no getting it back in the bottle. Part of her wanted to run to the car, drive until the rain became a soft hum on the roof and the world emptied out. Part of her wanted to march through that door and finally speak. She tasted the decision like metal on her tongue. Ben, she said, voice firmer than she felt, open the door. He did. Warmth spilled across the porch. Conversations faltered inside. The chandelier threw prisms that dazzled her vision as she stepped across the threshold. Her father wheeled around, red with rage. Guests parted like frightened birds. Her mother sat at the far end of the table, candles tremoring in front of her pale face. Helen's heart beat slow and huge. Thunder was nothing beside it. She set the damp gift bag on the polished table. The scarf slid out, a river of colour pooling under candlelight. I will not apologize for existing, she said, every syllable clear, and I will not leave. Silence stretched, taut as wire. In that hush she understood something simple and shocking. Power is not always a roar. Sometimes it is rain-wet footsteps and a voice that finally stops whispering. Outside, the storm moved on. Inside, another was just beginning. Rain had been Helen's tutor since childhood, counting beats on an attic roof while her father toasted Grace's trophies below. Every drop taught the same rule: silence keeps you safe. The lesson echoed as she stopped just inside the dining room, water pooling at her feet, relatives staring. Beyond the walls, traffic hissed on wet asphalt. The world still moved, with or without their approval. "Since you insist on drama," her father growled, "wipe your shoes." His voice had once been the law of her universe. Now it sounded brittle as the candy dishes on the sideboard. She steadied herself. "I will speak first," she said. "Then I will clean whatever mess remains." No one moved. Ben hovered behind her, a quiet anchor, yet she did not lean. This fight was older than either of them. Flames trembled on the birthday cake before her mother, Flora. The candles painted that familiar face with tired gold. In those eyes, Helen saw worry and, to her surprise, relief. She gripped an empty chair, wood still warm from someone who had fled, and memory unspooled. She was 25 again, mopping a coastal diner after midnight, neon bleeding across the linoleum. Her son slept in a booth while she counted tips that never stretched far enough. Her husband had gone with the spring tide, chasing a dream too fragile to name. On grease-smudged napkins she sketched Harbour Lights Consulting, a lighthouse logo beneath the words, "Stand and Shine." The first client found her by chance, a tourist whose boutique hotel drowned in bad reviews. Helen rewrote the lobby script, trained the staff at dawn, and ratings soared within a fortnight. Payment arrived in an envelope thicker than any paycheck she had seen. Rent swallowed most of it, the rest lit a spark. Word spread. She learned to sleep in brief bursts, to draft proposals with a toddler on her hip, to smile at investors who mistook her assistant for the boss. Every assumption became leverage. By the time her boy entered middle school, Harbour Lights employed more than 50 people. She bought nothing loud, kept her maiden name grey on contracts, and rented a modest office with the lighthouse etched on glass. Meanwhile, letters from home still addressed her as Mrs. Patterson, the failure who never finished much. Birthdays brought anonymous packages from a friend. Grace's tuition arrived via a scholarship fund no one could trace. Hospital bills vanished as if by miracle. Safer, Helen believed, for love to travel incognito. Years blurred into a relentless climb. She studied management podcasts while folding laundry, negotiated contracts over playground swings, and drafted policy manuals at a kitchen table littered with crayons like confetti after a parade. Each small victory sharpened her resolve. The dynamop left calluses, the lighthouse left purpose. She never returned for holidays. Distance was easier than watching her father praise Grace's violin scales while ignoring scholarship letters Helen herself had mailed. On quiet nights she reread the last note her mother dared send. "Stay safe, darling. Someday he will see you." The paper yellowed while she waited for that day. When her stepmother's heart failed, Helen wired the hospital enough funds to push surgery to the front of the queue. She signed the transfer as North Coast Charities. The doctor called it divine intervention. Her father called it lucky timing. Helen called it proof that anonymity could still heal. Now the dining room snapped back around her. Guests shifted, sensing a storm yet unsure where it would land. Her father tapped a spoon against his glass, grasping for vanished authority. "Enough theatrics," he said. "If you plan to humiliate us, do it quickly." The cruelty clarified her purpose. "Quickly then," she agreed. She lifted her chin. "Ben works for me, so do 200 others. For more than a decade this house has floated on lifeboats I built in silence." Gasps burst like fireworks under glass. Her father's jaw sagged without sound. Her mother's hand covered trembling lips. Upstairs, Grace gripped the window frame, knuckles pale as sea foam. Helen felt the old attic rain fade, replaced by something bright and unafraid. The lighthouse was lit. Whether they thanked her or cursed her, she would not dim again. The dining room breathed like a cornered beast. Faces Helen had known since childhood were suddenly strange, eyes flicking toward the door as if scandal might stain their clothes. Her father found his voice first, brittle with disbelief. A fairy tale. You expect us to swallow it because some boy parrots your lies? Ben's shoulders squared. I have payroll stubs, signed contracts, board minutes with her signature, but she can speak for herself. Helen resisted the urge to shield him. She did not need a sword, she needed the truth to stand upright at last. The money that covered Grace's second semester at St Albans, that was Harbour Lights. The mortgage refinance after the market crashed? Harbour Lights. All of it routed through shell charities so Dad's pride could stay intact, guests murmured. The mayor's wife set her champagne flute down as though it burned. Grace descended the staircase, barefoot, satin hem clenched in her fists. Why? She whispered, voice breaking on the single word. Why hide it from me? Helen's reply stuck behind years of silence. Dad taught me early that everything comes with strings. I wanted you to play your violin without hearing them snap. Grace flinched. Their father seized the pause. Rubbish. If you possessed half that fortune, you would flaunt it. She is spinning melodrama to ruin this night. His palm slapped the table, rattling silverware like timid bells. Tell them you lied, girl. Girl. The syllable held the weight of decades. Helen inhaled and tasted wood polish, candle wax, and fear finally melting off her skin. When I left this house, I promised myself I would succeed or disappear trying, but I would never again beg at this doorway. I kept one of those vows. Aunt Marjorie, whose gossip usually fluttered, leaned forward, curiosity eclipsing caution. If you are so wealthy, why keep driving that battered station wagon? Because it still runs, Helen answered. And because money is not a costume I wish to rent by the hour. A nervous laugh skittered around the room, then died under her father's glare. He turned to Ben. You will regret hitching yourself to her fantasy. You want letters? I will have lawyers pen volumes. Ben's calm did not waver. Those lawyers already tried. Harbour Lights won the countersuit. Gasps again. Grace's boyfriend was not some naive suitor. He was a strategist who had faced their father's wrath in a courtroom and emerged intact. Helen felt a tug on her sleeve. Her mother, once ethereal but now earthbound by years of quiet endurance, rose unsteadily. Enough, Flora said, voice soft yet absolute, like a candle flame refusing wind. We owe her. Sit down, her husband barked. Flora did not. She walked to Helen, pressed a cool palm to her cheek. In the hush, tears slid free. I knew, she whispered. Not at first, but the clues were too neat. I stayed silent because I feared what truth would do to him. The confession loosened a knot Helen had carried so long she forgot its shape. She clasped her mother's hand. No more silence, not for any of us. Her father's fury reddened into something bluish, alarming. His hand clutched his chest, breath hitched. Grace shrieked, rushing forward. For one suspended heartbeat, Helen thought it another manipulation. Then she saw the sweat, the hollowing eyes. Call 911, Ben ordered, but no one in the frozen crowd moved. Helen grabbed a phone, fingers steady now that crisis had a name she could treat. As she relayed symptoms, she realized the narrative had twisted. The family patriarch lay vulnerable, and she, the exiled daughter, was orchestrating rescue. Sirens bled into the night. Paramedics arrived, carving a path through guests who parted like reeds. Helen stepped back only when the gurney rolled past, her father's hand falling open, empty, as though releasing years of brittle authority. Rain had stopped. The night air smelled of pine and wet asphalt. In flashing red light, Helen saw her reflection in the window. Soaked hair, resolute eyes, a lighthouse keeper mid-storm. The ambulance pulled away, and she understood the house behind her would never return to what it had been. There was still cake on the table, candles gutted, smoke spiraling into a ceiling that had heard too many prayers answered in whispers. Somewhere upstairs a violin waited, silent, wondering which sister would pick it up next. Helen exhaled. The storm outside was over, but the reckoning inside had only begun. Emergency rooms speak in coded colours and monotonous beeps, a language Helen knew well from late-night charity visits she never signed with her own name. Yet, walking beside the gurney that carried her father felt surreal, like entering one of her anonymous donations and finding her own family on the receiving end. Flora clutched her purse with both hands, knuckles chalk white. Grace paced, gown whispering across cold linoleum. Ben handled paperwork, fielding questions with the efficiency of someone who had shepherded many crises for clients who assumed him calm by nature. A nurse approached. Doctor will update you when tests finish. Could be stress-induced myocardial event. He is stable for now. Stable. The word settled like dust. Grace broke first, tears spilling. This is my fault. The argument, the shock. No, Helen cut in gently. The fault belongs to years of anger untreated. She guided her sister to plastic chairs, the kind that remind visitors how temporary comfort can be. Grace buried her face in trembling hands. I always thought you left because you hated us. I was angry you missed graduations, birthdays, my engagement dinner. Tonight I realized that maybe you stayed away to protect something, maybe even me. Helen's throat tightened. I stayed away to protect myself, and yes, maybe you. Dad's love was conditional, measured in obedience. Grace peeked through damp lashes. Why let him believe you failed? You could have bought this hospital if you wanted. Success felt safer in shadows. The diner shifts, the night school, the first account. Every milestone I kept secret cemented a truth Dad could never rewrite. Harbour Lights became proof I was more than his verdict. And if I revealed it, he would find a way to claim credit or tear it down. Ben approached, handing steaming coffee in paper cups. Doctor says they will run more tests at dawn. Best we can do is rest. Flora nodded, but her eyes clung to the corridor where her husband vanished. He knew, she murmured. Months ago, I found a bank statement on his desk. He was tracing funds, following breadcrumbs back to you. A chill slipped over Helen. And he realized the anonymous benefactor was his eldest daughter. I think guilt ate at him, not pride. He wanted to confront you tonight, force an apology so he could forgive himself for being wrong. Helen absorbed that paradox. The apology of the wounded offered as balm to the one who caused the wound. He never asked why I gave, she said. Flora shook her head. His questions were always statements in disguise. Hours crawled. Neon clocks marked progress in silent, glowing increments. Ben dozed with arms crossed. Grace rested her head on Helen's shoulder, childhood closeness resurrected by necessity. Near sunrise, the doctor emerged, eyes dry, expression neutral. Blockage addressed with stent placement. He is unconscious but out of immediate danger. Relief pulsed through them, not triumph but a sober breath. Flora whispered gratitude. Grace wept again. Helen's heart felt oddly calm, as if a verdict had been postponed rather than delivered. The doctor hesitated. He asked for Helen before sedation. Heat flared behind her eyes. He used my name. Yes. He said, tell my girl I need to see the lighthouse for myself. Does that mean something? Helen clutched the styrofoam cup until it buckled. It means the tide is changing. They were allowed into the cardiac room 2 at a time. Helen entered last, trailing the antiseptic hush. Her father looked smaller, hair mussed, monitors tracing fragile peaks and valleys where certainty once lived. His lids fluttered. She stood beside him, uncertain whether anger or love ruled her pulse. Dad, she breathed. His eyes slit open, blue dimmed but still piercing. Mask muffling his words, he managed a rasp. You won. Tears blurred the green lines. This was never a contest. He tried to shake his head. Tubes restrained pride. I was wrong. The sentence fractured, but its pieces were unmistakable. A single tear escaped down weathered cheek. Helen laid her hand over his, the same hand that had smacked tables and steered her out the door. It trembled now, not with rage but fear. She did not know if forgiveness would grow, but in that moment she gave him something smaller and maybe kinder: permission to rest. Outside, dawn bruised the sky pink gold. Nurses changed shifts, vending machines hummed. The lighthouse inside Helen glowed steady, waiting for the next wave. 2 days stretched inside the hospital like held breath. During daylight, Helen answered Harbour Lights emails from plastic chairs, delegating crises with a focus she never knew she possessed. At night, she watched heart monitors, counting beats the way she once counted raindrops on attic shingles. Grace hovered between sorrow and awe. Ben ferried food, coaxed them to stretch legs, reminded them exhaustion helps no one. Flora, freed from decades of quiet appeasement, began to speak in paragraphs instead of apologies. She told stories of Helen's childhood Helen herself had forgotten: a cardboard puppet theatre, a science fair volcano powered by stolen baking soda, a 10-year-old running lemonade, stands with itemized ledgers. One evening, as shadows lengthened across linoleum, Helen's son arrived. Matthew was almost taller than Ben now, shoulders broad from rowing crew, eyes lit with the same determined spark his mother carried. "I caught the overnight bus," he said, hugging her tight. "Company can run without its founder for a minute." He turned to Grace. "I am your nephew." Grace laughed through tears. "I remember a toddler with sidewalk chalk." "Upgraded model," Matthew quipped, offering coffee he had snagged from the lobby. He glanced toward intensive care. "How is the old man?" Helen exhaled. "Recovering. And unraveling." Later, when visiting hours ended, Helen and Matthew walked the quiet corridor. "You all right, Mom?" she considered. "For years I built walls so no one could hurt me, but walls keep the good out too. Now I am chiseling windows and the air stings, but it is fresh." Matthew grinned. "That is very lighthouse of you." He grew solemn. "If Grandpa apologizes, will you believe him?" "I do not know. Forgiveness is not a checkmark, it is a season. Sometimes mild, sometimes stormy, always moving." The next morning, her father requested a family meeting. Nurses helped him to a recliner by the window, sunlight spilling like fragile mercy. Tubes still fed medication, but his voice, though raspy, held resolve. Grace perched on the edge of the bed. Flora stood behind, hands on his shoulders. Helen remained near the door, lighthouse distance. Ben and Matthew watched from the hallway, uninvited yet present. Her father cleared his throat. "I spent my life grading my children against expectations I barely understood. When Helen refused the scale, I called her failure. She proved me liar. That should make me proud, but pride is new territory." He paused, catching breath. "I followed money because I feared poverty more than lovelessness. Turns out both arrived." Grace reached for his hand. He gripped it, eyes wet. "I was cruel to you too," she whispered. He shook his head. "No ledger can balance tonight, but I want to start by asking Helen one question." He looked at her, blue eyes unmasked. "Will you teach me about your lighthouse?" Time slowed. Years of yearning for recognition collided with caution. Teaching him would not erase scars, but it might build something on the ruins. She stepped closer. The lighthouse stands on 3 pillars: people, integrity, and light that never blinds. We solve problems without shaming those who cause them. He let a wry smile slip. "Sounds like the opposite of my rule book." "Exactly," she replied, "and it is open source." They spoke until fatigue dimmed his gaze. When nurses guided him back to bed, he squeezed Helen's hand. The gesture was small, yet thunderous. That night, Helen, Grace, and Matthew left the hospital for fresh air. They found a late-night diner, vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. While pancakes sizzled, Grace asked, "Would you ever move back?" Helen traced a ring of condensation on her glass. "Maybe I never left. Pieces of me stayed, haunting hallways, paying bills. Now the rest is returning to claim them." Ben raised a toast with orange soda. "To haunted hallways, finding new tenants." Laughter rippled, gentle as dawn tide. No sudden triumph, just four people charting coastline none had mapped. Spring drifted towards summer, and with it the house on Alder Ridge shed its old skin. One afternoon Helen drove the familiar curve, station wagon humming like a memory finally tuned. A contractor's van idled out front. Grace was repainting the porch, choosing colours brighter than their father ever allowed. Inside, cardboard boxes labelled Family History littered the foyer. Flora sorted photo albums, removing duplicates of trophies, adding snapshots of lemonade stands and diner nights. The house smelled of sawdust, lavender polish, and something rarer, possibility. Helen climbed the stairs to the attic, where Rain once drummed lessons in silence. She pushed open the warped door and stared. The space was empty, floorboards sanded, a single skylight cut into the roof. In hardwood grains, she read two overlapping narratives: a girl who hid and a woman who refused to anymore. Footsteps behind. Her father, cane in hand, leaned on the threshold. Weeks of rehab left him thinner, eyes clearer. "Thought I would find you here," he said. Helen gestured to the skylight. "Grace's idea. She said attics should let in light." He chuckled, a sound uncluttered by mockery. "She always was my brightness." "Mine too." Helen folded arms, unsure if walls still needed guarding. He took a careful step into the room. "I requested something from the lawyer." From his pocket he withdrew a folded envelope. "Title transfer. This house is now yours and Grace's jointly." Shock pricked her spine. "You built this place. And built a prison inside it. Let the next generation decide its purpose." Helen turned the envelope over. The seal was unbroken. Ownership, once weaponized, now offered as apology. "Thank you," she said, voice raw, "but property deeds do not fix souls." "No," he agreed, "but they might fund renovations." He tapped the skylight. "I owe you more than equity. I owe you truth." He lowered himself onto an upturned crate. Sunlight mapped shifting clouds across his face. "The day you left, I felt deserted. But deeper, I felt exposed. You were proof that control is temporary, so I doubled down." He swallowed hard. "Every anonymous gift cut me, because generosity came from the daughter I called failure. Pride kept me silent until silence turned to shame." Helen sat opposite, knees almost touching. "Shame is heavy." "Too heavy for a weak heart." He managed a rueful grin. "Doctor says I have another chance. I want to spend it learning the language of lighthouses." She considered. Teaching him would be slow, possibly futile, yet worth attempting. First lesson: light does not judge the wave it saves. He breathed out, as if releasing tides unseen. Later they joined Flora and Grace in the garden, where peonies bowed under late sunshine. Ben arrived with Matthew, carrying paint swatches and iced tea. Conversations overlapped: porch rail designs, hospital bills already handled by Harbour Lights, Grace's idea to convert the study into a music room for free community lessons. At dusk they lit paper lanterns. Helen wrote one word on hers: home. She watched it float upward, glowing peach against deepening sky, until it joined others in a silent constellation. Grace looped an arm through hers. "Do you think the lighthouse ever gets lonely?" Helen smiled. "Never. It is surrounded by travellers searching for shore." The family lingered, fireflies stitching gold threads through twilight. The house behind them no longer felt haunted. It breathed with open windows and half-finished dreams. When stars settled, Helen walked the gravel drive alone. She dialed Harbour Lights, left a brief message for her deputy. "Taking indefinite leave. Company is yours for now. Remember the pillars." She ended the call, heart unburdened. At the mailbox she paused. Rain clouds gathered distant, but she was not afraid of storms anymore. She inhaled cut grass, distant lilac, the electric scent of change. Her father's voice drifted from the porch, telling Grace a joke old as their hometown. Laughter followed, shaky but sincere. Helen felt something inside click into alignment, like a lighthouse lens, finally polished. She did not know if perfect reconciliation existed. Waves would keep coming, nights would still be long, but the light would stand unhidden. And for the first time in many years, she believed that was enough. A breeze lifted her hair. Overhead, a lantern flickered, settled, then burst into brighter flame before fading among the stars. An unfinished story, perhaps, but one brave enough to keep its ending open. She turned toward the porch and walked home.